Askreddit. What tender and juicy drama is going on at your workplace? So, to set the scene, I will fake name the characters at the outset. My boss is Megan, her husband is Daniel, and my colleague is Melissa. So this all started about 18 months ago. Me, Megan, Daniel and Melissa all work in the same department. However, Daniel works in a different team because Megan can't be his boss. Anyway, we are all going for a team night out, curry, karaoke, blah blah, but Megan can't make it. So me, Daniel and Melissa all go for the curry, along with a couple of others. Come Monday morning, Megan calls me into a meeting, crying her eyes out, because she's convinced Melissa and Daniel slept together on the night out. She's absolutely hysterical, so I agree to ask Melissa as we are pretty close. I ask Melissa, who also hysterically cries, telling me that Megan is using her power as her boss to push her out of the company and begs me to believe that she didn't sleep with Dan. I trust her. I mean, we've known each other for a long time. Dan also promises me nothing happened. However, Meg and Dan's marriage suffered as a result of all the drama. Months go by. Megan becomes really strange. Starts following Melissa to the bathroom, trying to listen to her recorded calls and access her emails. I tell her that she can't use her position like this, and we do this weekly routine where she cries, promises me she won't do it again, and she does it again the next week. Anyway, it gets to a point where Melissa can't cope and she resigns. Megan walks around all triumphantly. Dan seems to reconcile with his wife, and they start trying for a baby. Last night, Melissa posts a picture of an ultrasound, clearly stating that it is her and Daniel's baby. Turns out they'd been sleeping together for 2 years, 6 months of which was prior to their wedding, and she'd lied to me the whole time. Megan is obviously devastated, walking around like a ghost of herself. Daniel thinks it's the funniest thing ever, now lives with Melissa, and is expecting a child on his anniversary date with Megan, which also happens to be Meg's due date with Dan's child. A woman at my work is lying about having cancer. She comes up with new sicknesses and calls out all the time. She told us she's pregnant with twins and sent us an ultrasound picture. We searched pregnant twins ultrasound on Google, and it was on the first page. It goes so much deeper than this too. She would send pictures of herself dead on the hospital table from the nurse, using her phone, to my direct manager. We don't know what to do. Our bosses are telling us to fire her, but we can't. Every time she calls out she has a doctor's note. One of the 2 attractive girls at my 500-person construction company went on a hot date with a guy from work and has started sleeping with him, but she won't tell anyone who. 3 different people have told me the gossip this morning and speculation is flying. It's me. I'm sleeping with a chick from human resources. Since this got popular, I'll admit this was about 6 months ago and there is an ending. We ended poorly after she got mad at me for things I still disagree were worth getting mad about, especially very mad about. But we patched it up and ended on good terms. In fact, we both realized we weren't 100% into each other and just liked the idea of a relationship. So we stayed friends, slept together a couple more times, and I left the company for unrelated reasons. I probably wouldn't try it again personally. I've already scoped out my new human resources chicks and wasn't interested, but my cousin is engaged to his former secretary and she's just lovely, so there's hope yet. We had a new employee who used her pregnancy to get out of doing any work. She was only a few months pregnant, and every time she was told to do even a minimal amount of work she'd hold a napkin over her mouth, put on her best puppy dog eyes, and pretend to be nauseous. And it always happened after she was asked to do some work, and even then, it was always at half the capacity the rest of us had to do. I knew that she was faking illness to get out of work. Everyone at the office accused me of being a hater for daring to suggest that she was pretending. But then she went and told me straight up, every time they tell me to do work I just act like I'm sick. Ha ha ha. My manager overheard her when she said this. She was given the option of quitting or being fired. But what would I know? I'm just a hater. We have been noticing small mysterious changes over the last month in our office. A square of brand new carpet being torn up and replaced in a hallway. The runner in front of the cafeteria disappeared, and a few weeks later we got a brand new one. Parts of the hallways have been strangely roped off. We also just had security cameras installed in all of the walkways. The situation was finally brought up and discussed in a private meeting. An employee has been pooping randomly throughout the building during business hours. These have been rather large piles of poop that people have narrowly missed stepping in. This is a very professional workplace, which makes this entire situation all the more perplexing. This person is still on the loose, and it could be anyone. Damn, yeah, at an old company I used to work at, we had this accountant I'll call Lori. Lori was her 40s and just insane gorgeous for her age. Not fake and plastic surgery looking, just natural beauty. We all tended to work late, and she was no exception. Not always, but maybe 2 days a week she'd stay over an hour or two. It got to where her husband would call our department's phone, since the main line would go to a recording after regular hours, and ask whoever to go find his wife. Sometimes she was there, but if she wasn't, the husband would get weird and start badgering whoever picked up "she's cheating on me, I know it. Who's she with?" So, we'd have to be careful about answering, as to avoid this guy and his questions. She had young kids, and every so often, after he'd call, we'd get a call from her kid or kids, asking to speak to their mom. Eventually, we brought it up to her, and she was so embarrassed, swore that he was possessive and crazy, and she wasn't doing anything wrong. We would always tell her it was between her family, and we didn't care, but she would always just deny, and say her husband was nuts. It got to the point where my boss, who was friends with her, would argue with her husband, tell him he was possessive, and that he was crazy. Eventually, we would all argue with the guy when he called, and confirm that she wasn't cheating. I stayed out of it for a long time, but after watching Lori cry in our office, after being confronted on it, I started to stand up to the guy when he'd call too, and tell him that I work with her and had never seen her act improper, and that the accusations were taking a toll on our workplace. He would usually talk to me fairly rationally and always say that the signs were all there, and he was almost certain she was cheating, but I always stood up for her. Then one day she put in her notice. We were all stunned, as she'd worked there for 20 years and definitely seemed like a lifer. It was only after she left that I found out she'd been having numerous affairs over the course of several years, with coworkers as well as other random guys. And to make it worse, my boss, her friend, had known all along, and was helping to cover for her. I felt terrible for sticking up for her, and really trying to convince the husband that she was faithful. The new girl in CS customer service just kinda joined the other early to mid 20 something ladies at lunch one day without being invited, and they are all semi-nice, so it was no big deal. Well, I guess new girl is a bit of a crap stirrer and has been talking crap to other people about ladies in the group. I'm so excited to see where this goes. To make things easier to understand, I'm going to replace real positions / titles with terms like president, vice president, manager, etc. Basically, our chain of command from the top down goes president, vice president, manager or managers, drones. Our president is a busy guy, traveling a lot, has a lot on his plate, so the vice president pretty much runs the show in our building. As long as I've been employed here, he's butted heads with a senior manager, Susan. Susan has an attitude problem, is extremely type A, and everything has to be just to her liking, or she'll literally refuse to do work to advance the many projects we have going on. The president loves her because she's great at what she does, unfortunately, so all of her demands are given into. Fortunately, my team and her team are able to work separately. Susan and another manager, Linda, have had a long-standing feud for reasons I don't even know. Apparently, it was bad enough that company lawyers had to get involved. Yeah. So they are always butting heads. There was a blowout last week, where essentially Linda told the president it's either me or Susan. Monday, Linda no longer worked with us. There's some construction going on in our building which pretty much brought our work to a grinding halt. We use some very sensitive and expensive equipment that can't be moved from the construction space, so we just cover it up with plastic tarps. Susan's workspace was first on the construction list. Vice President notices that the day before construction was scheduled to start, one of Susan's drones forgot to cover up a piece of equipment, and since Susan literally loses her goddamn mind if anyone touches her stuff, he chose to not go in her workspace, but just let her know instead. This resulted in Vice President and Susan having a screaming match in the hallway, with Susan red in the face bellowing that Vice President has no right to tell her what to do, go in her workspace, or touch her things. As Vice President and Susan's superior, he literally has the right to do all of these things. The next day, Susan had taken duct tape to the door knobs and keyholes to all of her workspaces. Even when her drones needed inside, she'll cut open the duct tape for them, wait for them to finish, and then seal it back up when they are done. The rest of us are equal parts entertained, disgusted at the petty behavior, and nervous that it might come down to Susan or the Vice President. And if we lose the Vice President, essentially, we are all out of jobs. It's with my ex-coworkers and my barmates. They've all been sleeping with each other, and the drama has started to build. Jealousy and other crap. What used to be a carefree fun zone has turned into people avoiding each other, getting into stupid matches, etc. I don't want nothing to do with any of that crap. At some point it's going to blow up, and rather be as far away from it as possible when that happens. Last person to get to the daily meeting on Thursday has to buy donuts for the office on Friday. The drama is next level. I'd use this as an excuse to skip the daily meeting, but just popping my head in at the last second so that I've technically shown up. Then I'd buy the donuts for the office. I do this for 6 weeks and everyone gets used to knowing that I'll always be last and the pressure is off for them to show up early. Then on week 7 I show up early and hell them up, just so they remember who's doing them a favor. Then on week 8 I go back to normal and buy donuts, and then on week 9 I stop showing up to work altogether, but leave an empty donut box at my desk with my suicide note scrawled on the lid. Actually, I'd been hired for a new job back on week 7, so I'm over at that job now, but these idiots don't need to know that. Last place I worked, the Vice President of Human Resources started sleeping with the married manager of Human Resources. She got a divorce, and a few months later ended up leaving the company when Vice President of Human Resources started banging some other employee. This was a big company, BTW, like 10,000 plus employees. Edit, I guess he was a dedicated frontline manager. He never shied away from the grunt work. A teacher at our school was constantly being reported by her assistant for grossly and absurdly exaggerated offenses because the assistant doesn't like the teacher she's been assigned to this year. The teacher is new to our school. The assistant is related to a high-up administrator and has already been moved several times. Administration kept writing her up, the teacher, despite her protests that the complaints were absurd, and kept requesting this assistant be switched with another. Teacher finally had enough and quit. Admin spreads around the rumor that the teacher had to leave her job for mental health reasons. True story. One co-worker had a bunch of cash stolen from her purse. Everyone knows who did it. Not only was she the only one not in attendance at a meeting when the money went missing, but she suddenly started avoiding my co-worker when they had been friends before that. Also, she would have to know exactly where the purse was stored in order to sneak in and back before being noticed. Now no one in the office is talking to the alleged thief. That's our version of office justice, since management can't fire her without more proof. I work for a very prominent doctor in my city who has a solo practice. His wife is the practice manager. They hired a cute blonde RN in her early 30s, married, to work part-time. I work next to her, and she tells me everything. Doctor proceeds to hit on her in person, via intra-office instant messaging, and via text. The latter two methods cause the wife to take notice. Instead of apologizing for extreme discomfort this caused the nurse, the wife progressively and passive-aggressively pushes her out of the practice by gradually reducing her hours, making her keep track of everything she does minute by minute, and generally making her work environment crappy. She's gone now. It worked. This reminds me of the time I got to work, and the middle elevator of the 3 was out of order. Turns out we had a bum living in our building for weeks who would just hide during the day on empty floors. Apparently this gentleman had mental issues as well, as he one day decided to make his presence known to the entire office by smearing his poop all over that poor elevator. Elevator was thoroughly cleaned by professionals, but still reeked for a long time after.